All right, this is Rudy. It's May the 4th, the year 2016. I have in front of me the sentencing transcript of Kent Hovind, as stated by Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, the Jezebel daughter of Beelzebub herself. And before I get started, I want to give 3 reference books that would be good to read for anyone. And that is The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, War is a Racket by Smedley Butler, and Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. So I've read this before with a lot of emotional passion, and it's just so obviously stupid and biased and evil that she said this speech before sending Kent Hovind to prison for 10 years, that most people just get it. They don't have to have it explained to them or broken down on why it's wrong. But sometimes I make a lot of assumptions that people have common sense, and that's a bad assumption because a lot of people don't have common sense. So this time I'm going to read through it, provide you commentary, at least my commentary, on why her speech is so obviously wicked. And see, they had to target Kent Hovind and make his crimes out to be a lot more than it was, which was he's absolutely innocent. But they had to make it sound like he was doing something horrific in order to attempt to destroy his ministry that was tearing at the root of the New World Order, which considers all humans animals, and the strongest survive, and the people that are in control justify their actions when they enslave and control the rest of humanity. But in any event, let me read to you sentence by sentence from this daughter of Beelzebub herself, who I have no doubt has a special warm spot saved for her in the fiery pits of hell for the damnation and, sentencing an innocent man to prison for 10 years. And she's still prancing around a moldy courthouse in Florida and pursuing her career as if she did nothing wrong. But justice will prevail, and every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and that's going to catch up to her one day. But in any event, let me just start on page 111, and I'll provide commentary, and I'll read it in a lot less emotional passion this time. Another point I want to make clear as to you, Mr. Hovind, and that is that this nation is not perfect by any means, but in my mind, there is none greater on this earth, and we who live in this country are truly blessed to be here. So you got to ask, why is she waving the American flag and telling everyone that this is the greatest nation on earth before she sentences Kent Hovind to prison? Would his crime be any less worse if we were of a poor nation? I don't understand why she's jumping on the cheerleader wagon for how great America is right before she sentences Kent Hovind. It's absolutely, she's setting herself up to, I'm a proponent of this great nation like Kent Hovind is not, the sky is blue, or something, anyway. And I don't know how great this nation is. How many babies do we kill every day? Like 4,000, or maybe that's worldwide, but I'm sure we kill several hundred, if not several thousand, every single day. The wickedness of America is absolutely horrific. And there's a saying that God's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah if he doesn't judge America soon. So I don't even know that I agree with her regarding the greatness of our current country that we live in. But in any event, and we who live in this country are truly blessed to be here. I'm going back to the trial transcripts now from the daughter of Beelzebub, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. Most of us are blessed in that manner simply by virtue of the fact of who our parents are and the fact that we were born here. Now listen to that. She says parents plural and born here as in on American soil. So even she alludes to the fact that of what a natural born citizen is without actually using the words. I found that kind of interesting. We did nothing to earn the privilege of being able to call ourselves American. Well, I may not have done anything to earn the privilege of being called an American, but my parents certainly did. And my parents, and everyone parents who's an actual, natural born citizen of this country, have fought for the freedoms that we have passed down from generation to generation. So let's continue. We did nothing to earn the privilege of being able to call ourselves American. Well, okay, I don't know what our point is there, but let's move on. And as Americans, we enjoy certain rights and privileges that are embodied within our Constitution. And these are rights and privileges that make each of us sitting in this room uniquely American, and they also make us the envy of the world. Mr. Hovind, you have enjoyed those rights and privileges throughout your life. I presumed you've lived here and enjoyed them, just as most of us have. And I can actually sit and consider your legal situation now, and I can identify several of those rights you have enjoyed. Well, isn't that wonderful that we've got this young female sitting as a judge, and she's going to identify for Mr. Hovind the rights that he enjoys, and as if she's in some special spot of authority. Or she may think she's in a special spot of authority when she puts on that robe every day and everybody stands up as she walks in that courtroom, but she'll be writhing in pain in the eternal lake of fire when her judgment day comes. But anyway, you have enjoyed the freedom of speech. She almost sounds like she's saying it as if I don't know, what's the point of her saying all this? You got to ask yourself, like, why is she bringing this up? Let's continue. You have enjoyed repeatedly the right of access to the courts. You have enjoyed the right to a trial by a jury of your peers, and you have also enjoyed the right to due process of law. And as I am confident there will be an appeal of any sentence that I impose today, you will continue to enjoy the right to due process of law, regardless of your convicted status. You've also enjoyed the benefit of living in a prosperous society where there is food from our farmers, there is protection from our military, there is education from our academic institutions, there is health care from our medical institutions, there is infrastructure from our public works, and the list goes on and on. And those things are paid for by our taxes. Okay, I want to stop right there. That's absolutely not true. Anybody who thinks their taxes pays the military, pays our farmers, pays for the education from our academic institutions, pays for our health care, the infrastructure and the public works is absolutely bamboozled. And that's why you got to read The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. They don't tax us because they need the money to pay for those things. They tax us to suppress us as slaves. They make money out of thin air. It's called I think it's called the Mandrake magical system or something. It's described in The Creature from Jekyll Island. But these people, they run a fiat currency from the Federal Reserve, and they pay all of those institutions, the military. War is a racket. They pay, they subsidize the farmers not to grow things. They bias the educational institutions to teach science falsely so-called and to promote a religion called evolution. They bend and pervert all of these institutions with money from the Federal Reserve. That's created out of thin air. It's not paid for by your taxes. So that's where she's wrong right off the bat. And if you don't pay for your taxes, don't go to sleep crying your little head to sleep at night thinking that some soldiers somewhere are going to be going hungry because you didn't pay your taxes. They don't take your taxes to pay other entities within the United States government. They make money out of thin air. And that's why it's important to read The Creature from Jekyll Island. So that's right there is where she's wrong. It's a very important concept because people think, well, I don't want to pay taxes because of this and that, or if I pay my taxes, it's going to be you. It's like they don't use your money to do anything that they do. They have all the money that they need. They have all the money that they will ever need to pay for abortions, to pervert our educational systems, to promote pornography, to promote all of their evil agendas, to change history. So they don't need your tax money. And if you didn't pay any more taxes, 45% of Americans don't pay taxes anyway. And I've never been a tax protester, and I do pay my taxes. But if I didn't pay my taxes, I'm just saying that it wouldn't like hurt the government any, because they make money out of thin air. They have an unlimited supply of money, and it's, what it's backed by? It's not backed by gold and silver. It's backed by the United States military, by threat and weapons is what it's backed by. But let's continue. She says, and those things are paid for by our taxes. Wrong. But you have enjoyed all of this simply because, again, you are fortunate enough to have been born here. Well, first of all, we're not picked where we're born, right? As far as I know, I don't know that we get a choice about it. We just born where we're born. And our parents pass down certain benefits from generation to generation. But whether we are fortunate in that is for our own selves to determine, not for some judge to try to put a guilt trip on us and to try to say that we're fortunate or not fortunate. It's not Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, the daughter of Beelzebub Jezebel herself, to tell me whether I should feel fortunate. Okay, that decision is up to each of us individually, and as far as history is concerned, and how this country came about and why this country was prosperous, whether we stole it from the Indians, whether the revolution against the British was the proper thing to do, that's for you to decide. But they have perverted history. There's no doubt about it. Okay, and as I tell immigrants who stand before the court to be naturalized, I tell them that these rights and privileges comes great responsibility. And this is a responsibility that you have to your country. And one of those responsibilities is the payment of taxes. Okay, that's the daughter of Beelzebub herself, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, saying it's it's the immigrants' great responsibility. Well, first of all, Mrs. Daughter of Beelzebub, 45% of Americans don't pay taxes. So why did you single out Ken Hovind? Maybe because somebody in the George Bush administration told you to single him out. Maybe you're using your power in a corrupt and wicked way to single out somebody who was telling other important truths, and that you thought it was appropriate not only to send him to prison for 10 years, but when he was about to get out of prison, you came up with another charge that he mailed a letter and he should go to prison for the rest of his life. And it had nothing to do with whether he paid any taxes or not. It had everything to do with the impact that man was making on the New World Order. And 45% of Americans don't pay taxes anyway. I don't see you sending 45% of Americans to prison for 10 years. So, it's very hard for me to talk about this daughter of Beelzebub, Jezebel, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers without getting angry. But one thing that gives me some solace is that God did create hell. And I know, I know that Bible is true with every fiber of my being. And unless she repents and comes to know the Lord Jesus Christ and takes the consequences for what she's done to that man's life, his family, his ministry, and unless she does that, there's a special warm spot in hell for people in authority that have used their power for wickedness that she has. But let's continue reading her sentencing transcript, and I'm just breaking this down so you guys will understand how wicked this speech is. I mean, I can't believe that I'm even having to do this. It should be, just obvious, right? To any rational thinking person how evil this speech is that she gave before she sent Ken Hovind to prison. Keep in mind, she's the same judge who tried to put him in prison for the rest of his life for simply mailing a letter when he was due to get out in 2015. Let's go on. Okay. And one of those responsibilities is the payment of taxes. I can't say it any better or more plainly than has been stated by another judge in another case, the Honorable Frank C. Damrell, which that's another way of saying that Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers doesn't know how to think for herself, and she plagiarized another judge's work in order to try to make some stupid points and bias points, because she couldn't come up with any good arguments of her own against Ken Hovind, so she had to go borrow like another speech that somebody probably gave her, because she's so stupid that she can't come up with her own arguments. But you should have seen this pride of this lady as she sat up in that courtroom when I went down there to Florida in 2015, and she tried to manipulate the jury selection process, and everybody was confessing their sins to her during the what's it called, the voir dire? I don't know, just the jury selection process, and it's just it just made me want to puke and vomit, man. It's just, this lady is absolute pure evil. But anyway, if you'll permit me, I'm going to quote from him, Frank C. Damrell, in a sentencing in which he sentenced someone for tax fraud in his own court. And this is Frank C. Damrell is some judge over in California, and just knowing that he's from California tells me everything I need to know. And what Judge Jamrell said was, a person who has enjoyed life, they always talk about enjoying life. It's like they're jealous of men who know how to live life and live it with enjoyment. It's like she's miserable in her own little perverted little world. Her husband probably abuses her and doesn't pay her any attention. Of course, Ken Hovind's always smiling, and everywhere he goes, he's talking to the children. He had a wonderful family life back then. His ministry was taking off, and you can just see the jealousy rising up in her little wicked face. I can just see her wicked little eyes and her wicked little mouth and her wicked little facial expressions, and she talks about people who enjoy life as if it's some sin to enjoy our lives that the Lord God has given us. But anyway, in which he sentenced someone for tax fraud in his own court. And what Judge Damrell said was, a person who has enjoyed life. It's like, well, if Ken Hovind was miserable, does he get a lesser of a sentence? It's like he gets a bigger sentence because he's enjoying life. It's absolutely absurd. A comfortable life in this country that refuses to take up the obligation of citizenship is completely reprehensible. Well, whether an individual chooses to take up the obligation of citizenship is that individual's decision. And it's none of your dang business, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. So whether he claims to be a U.S. citizen or whether he doesn't claim to be a U.S. this corporate United States of America that's sold out to all ethics and our biblical and Christian foundations, whether he claims to be a citizen or whether he ain't none of your dang business. And you ain't got no right to send somebody to prison whether they claim to be a citizen or not. But anyway, 10 freaking years, man. The more I think about it, the more angrier I get. Let's see. It's completely reprehensible. We have a social compact in this country, and it is embodied in our Constitution. It allows us, as citizens, to live together under one government. It's not our social compact. It's our Christian values that allowed us together to live together under one government. And since all of this, we are all one crap and diversity and inclusiveness, that's all falling apart. But anyway, and when someone fails to recognize their obligations to their country, they break that compact that they have with all the other citizens, particularly those that have given their life to allow those persons, including you, Mr. Hovind, to pursue the life that you have pursued in this country. And I find that to be a most difficult thing. Okay, so she just compared or made the argument that there's men and women in the military who have given their life in fighting for this country, and Mr. Hovind is basically not upholding his end of the bargain by paying his taxes to support these men and women in the military who have given their life. Well, if there's someone, first of all, this is why you need to read War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. And for our men and women in the military, I see them as captured pawns of the enemy. And Terry Lakin was one of the brave ones who stood up and said, I don't recognize this evil usurper, foreigner, fraud as my commander-in-chief, and I will invite my own court-martial. Now, the military ate him alive during his court-martial in, I think it was Fort something. I can't think of the name right now. Fort Meade, maybe. I'll find it later. But they court-martialed him. I did go down there. I just can't think of the name of the city right now. My brain is failing me on that. But anyway, they court-martialed Terry Lakin, and they sent him to Fort Leavenworth Prison. Okay? And, because the military couldn't handle a brave individual who would actually question the current so-called commander-in-chief who's absolutely put out a forged birth certificate, who's absolutely doesn't meet the constitutional eligibility requirements of a natural-born citizen. And so when I think of the military, I think of like individuals who've been captured by the enemy. And they're just like in Nazi Germany, when this evil leadership that currently controls our military tells men and women of our military to come in and confiscate our guns or to turn their arms on the American public, guess what? Some of them are going to do it. I'm telling you the truth. Some of them are going to go out and try to confiscate our guns. They're going to try, and they're going to turn their weapons on the American public, guaranteed, because they've weeded out anybody with any moral compass. They've weeded out anybody with any American first patriotism. They've weeded out anybody that has any constitutional or biblical beliefs, and they're specifically instilling in our military this attitude of, following evil dictatorship and being rewarded financially, plus with, promotions. And, it's just like War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. You need to go read that book. And so, the fact that she's bringing up there's men and women who fight and die for this country, it has nothing to do with whether Ken Hovind appreciated those people. You can speak to Ken Hovind directly. I'm sure he appreciates people who think they're fighting for this country, but the bottom line, in my opinion, is that they don't know it, but they're controlled by an evil leadership who's getting them involved in wars that they shouldn't even be involved in, and the people who are leading the military are absolute wicked as hell. I mean, just absolute, pure, to the core, wicked. And my father, who was in the Marines, I have a brother who was in the Marines, and my father just... He would go on for hours talking about the decisions that were made in the Korea War and how it was made by either incompetent or pure evil leadership that got men in the military killed, and it affected their lives forever and their families' lives forever. And the leadership didn't have to make that decision. They didn't need to send men to an island in, some sort of Pacific Ocean to capture a particular island. It didn't have to be done. Didn't accomplish anything. And my dad would go into story after story of just men who lost their lives for nothing. And so rather than putting the blame where the blame deserves, which I believe all wars are banker wars, and the people who run the Federal Reserve are pretty much to blame for every war that's ever started for the past 200 years or more. Anyway, she's trying to make Ken Hovind like a guilt trip, like he's somehow not, supportive or appreciative of men who die for us that fight in the military. Anybody who can't see past that stupid argument, I mean, there's something wrong with your perception, right? To somehow, like, I'm gonna sentence Ken Hovind to prison for 10 years because he doesn't appreciate the men who die in wars for our military. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And this daughter of Beelzebub, Jezebel herself, her words are going to come back on her tenfold one day. But anyway, let's go on. Particularly those who have given their life to allow those persons, including you, Mr. Hovind, to pursue the life that you have pursued in this country. That life that she's referring to is the life of promoting creationism over evolution, and is destroying her boss's foundation for controlling us, right? That's the life that she's referring to that aggravates her so much. I find that to be a most difficult thing. Young people willing to sacrifice their lives so that we can live in a secure and free society. And the only obligation, for the most part, that we're asked of as citizens in order to have the honor of being citizens in this country is to pay some tax so as to allow our government to continue providing security and freedom to us all. You see how she's trying to tie the fact that your tax dollars is tied directly to providing security and freedom? That's absolutely not true. 45% of Americans don't pay taxes anyway. I've always paid my taxes, by the way. And if anybody looks at my tax history, I've probably paid more taxes than anybody listening to this, listening to me talk. I'm not bragging about that, but I'm just saying, 45% of Americans don't pay their taxes. And so she's trying to make Ken Hovind tying his 10-year sentence directly to the fact that he's not appreciative of the security and freedom that we enjoy as Americans. And I would say that the security and the freedom that we enjoy comes from the fact that we adhered to biblical foundations in this country. And we all had a moral fabric that was instilled throughout this country, and that has been destroyed. And so we no longer have the freedoms that we once had, nor the security. And if you think that money, taxes, is what provides security and freedom, then you are woefully mistaken, Miss Jezebel, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. Not only that, but it doesn't come from the tax revenue anyway. It comes from the mandrake magic system of fiat currency, and they make the money up out of thin air, right? And so there'll never be a time that you won't have enough money to pay for the military as long as people accept this fiat currency, and eventually it will fail. The money system will fail, and it won't be because we didn't pay our taxes. It'll be because we've mismanaged the United States government, and we've gone to a money system that's not backed by anything except corruption and greed and force and threat of death. But in any event, and to me, the story is simple as that. Your failure to honor your obligation to this country. Judge Damrell in his sentencing referenced the men and women of our armed forces and sacrifices that they have made for us. Man, this is the biggest blowhard lady I've ever heard of in my life. She's about to send him to prison for 10 years, and she keeps talking about people in the military dying. What's that got to do with Ken Hovind? Man, this is the stupidest freaking speech I've ever heard of in my dang life. And I think it's important for you and all those here in the courtroom and elsewhere to realize and appreciate the fact that these men and women, past, present, and future, not only fight for your security, Mr. Hovind, and all of our security, but they also fight for your right to practice and preach your creation science evangelism in any way that you choose, and even your right, which is unique in many countries, but even your right to criticize our government and its tax letters. Man, you can really see the heart of the issue here. She is extremely aggravated at Ken Hovind's creation science evangelism ministry. That's the root of why she's coming out so strong and trying to equate Ken Hovind as somehow being responsible for not supporting the men and women who die in our military, which is the most absurd argument I've ever heard of in my entire life. Let's go on with her stupid speech. But make no mistake, these men and women are not fighting and are not sacrificing their lives to give you the right to do the sorts of things that you did in this case. They are not, they're not fighting for his right to withdraw his own money from his own bank to pay his own bills from money that Christians sent to him from all over the world. They're not fighting for him to freely withdraw money in cash as he sees fit. And who the heck cares if it was under $10,000? I don't care. I went to the bank, Miss Jezebel, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, and you know what I did? I withdrew $9,999.99, and I dared people to call your sorry Jezebel butt and report me to try to come arrest me with that IRS agent Scott Snyder and Charles Evans, and I didn't see nobody at my front door arresting me. Do you think that our men and women in the military are going to be upset that I withdrew my own money to pay my own bills? It's the stupidest freaking argument. I can't even talk about this without getting upset. I thought I was going to do like a nice little talk. But the more I read of her crap, it's just diarrhea of the mouth that came out of her mouth that day. Oh my goodness, this lady is wicked. It's just evil and wicked. And this is what happens when you give stupid people authority and power and make them judges. This is it. This lady, feminine, evil, reprobate devil from hell, right? It just spews wickedness and trying to justify sending an innocent man to prison for 10 years. But let's continue reading her garbage here. They are not fighting and sacrificing their lives so that you can skirt obligations to this country, obligations to them. It is our tax dollars that puts food in the mess halls of our military and puts mattresses on their bunks and weapons in their hands so they can fight to protect this country. And you may think that my statements are a bit over the top. Yeah, I certainly think they're evil and over the top. But I don't. I think they are right on point. And the conduct in this case is extremely serious. Of course, you have to make it sound serious, Jezebel, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, because you're about to send an innocent man, break up his family, break up his ministry, destroy one of the leading lights of the Christian Christian creation science evangelism, destroy one of the leading lights in that cause, and so you got to make it sound like he did something extremely serious when he withdrew his own money from his own bank, to pay his own bills, which is absurd, man. This thing is the most ridiculous thing. And you go on to say that the tax dollars puts food in the mess halls. No, that's not true. I've already explained that like a million times. Our tax dollars don't pay for our military. They got money regardless of whether you pay your taxes or not. They make money out of thin air. How many times I got to say it to you, Miss Jezebel, Judge, Devil, Beelzebub lady? I receive letters from you expressing the view that sometimes those convicted of heinous crimes, how about incest or rape or murder or torture or how about pedophilia, right? How about those heinous crimes? You think they're going to get 10 years in prison? I know murderers who don't get 10 years in prison. And they're trying to make it out like the 10 years she's about to give Ken Hovind is somehow justified. I receive letters from many of you expressing the view that sometimes these convicted of heinous crimes, heinous crimes? Oh, how about murder? You think that should get 10 years, Jezebel? No, let's send somebody to prison for 20 years for mailing a letter. It's wicked what you did, lady. It's wicked what you did. And when justice comes to you, it's going to be a beautiful thing. In Revelations it says that there's saints crying for vengeance. I mean, I can't wait for vengeance to come to that lady. Oh my goodness. I received letter. Okay, convicted of heinous crimes are subject to less time than Mr. Hovind is facing in this case. This is a serious case, a serious charges, serious conduct. Make no mistake about it. By your conduct in this case, Mr. Hovind, in my opinion, you dishonor the men and women in our military. You dishonor your fellow Americans, and you've dishonored the Constitution of the United States. Did he dishonor Grandma? And did he dishonor Apple Pie? And did he dishonor the little puppy dog over in the corner? I mean, you just making the biggest, stupidest speech I've ever heard of in my life. He's dishonored the fellow Americans and the men and women in our military and the Constitution of the United States of America. Woo, man, she is on a roll. The wickedness in this lady, man, there is going to come a time. Woo, I can't wait for justice to come around to this lady. All right, I'm prepared to go forward with this sentence. What is she going to say? I can't read anymore. She goes on to say that the number of times that he withdrew the money from the bank is aggravating the sentencing requirements, and so because he did it 57 times, first of all, he didn't even know that it was illegal, right? And so whether he did it one time or 57 times, structuring, which is the stupidest law in the history of the world, should not have any effect on whether he gets less time or more time. I mean, I can't even imagine, what's going through this wicked lady's heart as she's saying all this stuff. But anyway, look, you need to read a book called Atlas Shrugged, and basically all of us have to take responsibility for our own life. We're not entitled. We don't live in a world where we're entitled to things. And that's the problem, is that people think, well, I'm an American, I'm entitled to food from farmers, I'm entitled to nice roads, I'm entitled to free health care, I'm entitled to military. You're not entitled to any of that, right? You are responsible for your life, right? And the government is, anytime you take things from the government, I suggest that you don't. And their medical system is absolutely evil, and it's built to bring death and destruction upon you when you enter it. The Food and Drug Administration is built to bring death and destruction upon you when you engage that system. The educational system is built to pervert the truth and to warp your mind. Everything from the government is absolutely evil and wicked. And unfortunately, the men and women who serve in the military are pawns of an evil leadership. And it's very unfortunate. And to try to tie all of this propaganda that Ken Hovind is not somehow supporting that, because he took his own money out of his own bank, and the other charge was that his own ministry workers, they paid their own taxes, and since it was a ministry, he wasn't required to withhold their taxes anyway. The government didn't lose any money because a ministry worker paid their own tax anyway. And the third charge was that he prayed for somebody on a radio. Well, so what? I pray. You know what I pray? I pray Psalms 109 for Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. And This is the video that I will point to people to in the future if they ask the very stupid question of why was her speech so bad, right? This is the video that I'll point them to. And if you still ain't figured it out after listening to this, well, then I suggest that you just go. Pay your taxes, go check yourself into the nearest hospital and drink all your fluoride, eat your genetically modified food. If you get somebody pregnant, or if you're a female and you get pregnant, take your baby down to the abortion clinic and you can have the wicked devils kill your baby, and you just live your perverted life and walk straight into hell if that's what you want. But there's some of us that understand why America was prosperous, and was because we had biblical and Christian foundations, had nothing to do with this social compact of paying taxes. Our founders revolted this country by being taxed without taxation without representation, and and that's exactly what's going to have to happen in this country, is a violent revolution. Unfortunately, it's absolutely going to have to come to that, because the people that are going to try to suppress us and turn us into slaves, they're not going to listen to rational thought, and they're going to try to force us to the point of either disarming us by taking away our guns or turning us into slaves, whatever the case may be. And there's some of us that simply will not live in that world, and it will come down to a violent revolution. And when that happens, let God Almighty sort it all out and let Him get glory. And but there's some of us that will not live in a world where you try to make us into slaves. And Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, I pray that you do repent and come to know the Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that you come out and apologize to Ken Hovind and his family before you die. I pray that you do all of that and suffer the consequences. And if that means that you have to suffer some consequences for the evilness that you've done, well, so be it. It's better to suffer consequences in this world than to spend eternity in hell. Take care.